Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Turkey Tater Tot Hot Dish. That's right, there are two things you need to know about casseroles from the upper Midwest. First, they don't call it a casserole, they call it a hot dish. And second, they are often topped with tater tots. And if something's topped with tater tots, especially something like this, I want to eat it, and so should you. And to get started, what we'll do is heat some oil and butter over high heat in a skillet. And once that butter melts, we can toss in some sliced mushrooms, along with a big pinch of salt. And what's going to happen as these come up to temperature is that salt is going to draw moisture out of the mushrooms, which is a good thing, because eventually that moisture will evaporate out of the pan. And once that happens, our mushrooms will start to fry in that oil and butter. And if I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. A browned mushroom is a meaty mushroom. And we don't have to spend like 20 minutes getting these super browned, although we could, and that would be delicious. But I think as long as we go at least this far, we should be fine to move to the next step. And that would be to toss in our diced onion, and we will stir that in. And then we'll saute this for about 3 or 4 minutes, or until those onions go from bright white to something that starts to turn translucent. And that's it. Once those onions have softened up a little bit, we will stop and add 2 pounds of ground turkey. And what we'll do is take a spatula and break that up into smaller pieces, which don't need to be super fine, because we're going to be adding more things and doing more stirring and mixing. And turkey is a fairly fragile meat, and it will be broken up beautifully by the time we're done. Oh, and by the way, if you have the option, buy the turkey that has a little bit of fat in it. Right, this was 93% lean. But they also sell a 99% lean, 1% fat version, which I don't think works as well for anything really, but especially this. But either way, once our turkey's looking a little something like this, we can stop and toss in our seasonings, which will include the rest of our salt, some freshly ground black pepper, some smoked paprika, a little touch of garlic powder, and then last but never least, a few shakes of cayenne. And at this point, we can probably back our heat down to about medium-high, and then we will cook all this stirring for another 3 or 4 minutes, continuing breaking up and browning the meat. And once we're happy with how everything's looking, and by that I mostly mean we don't have any liquid boiling at the bottom of the pan, okay, our pan should be dry as we move on to the next step, which is to sprinkle over and stir in about a 1/4 cup of flour. And what's going to happen is that flour is going to attach itself to the oil and butter in the pan, along with that little bit of fat coming out of the turkey, and it's basically going to form a roux, R-O-U-X, which is the fancy French name for a starchy paste that we use to thicken sauces and gravies. So once that's been mixed in, we will continue to cook stirring for another 3 or 4 minutes, just to cook out that raw pasty taste from the flour. And then once we feel like we've cooked that flour long enough, and our mixture's looking a little something like this, we can stop and add our peppers, which would be a can of diced green chilies, and hatch chilies to be exact. And then we'll also do a little bit of diced fresh red bell pepper, followed by our last ingredient, some chicken broth or stock. Or if times are tough, you could just use water, and maybe a spoon of chicken bouillon base. And what we'll do is stir all this together, and then wait for it to come up to a simmer. And once this eventually does start simmering, we will be able to tell how thick it's going to be, since a mixture with a roux does not thicken until it's boiling. So once this does start to boil, we'll give it a stir and evaluate. And if it seems too liquidy, we can let it reduce. Or if it seems too dry, we can add some more broth or water. But this was looking pretty much perfect. So all we need to do at this point is taste it for seasoning. And if it needs another pinch of salt, go ahead and stir that in. And that's it. Once we're happy with how it looks, feels, and tastes, we'll pull it off the heat, and we will carefully transfer that into a casserole dish. And your standard 9x12 or 9x13 would be perfect. Oh, and I am doing a couple things differently than they might do in the upper Midwest. All right, first of all, I'm not using a can of soup in this. And then the other common addition would be a can of green beans, which I'm not going to use, but if you want to, go ahead. I mean, you are, after all, the Minnesotan, of what should go in. But I was very, very happy with my choices, and I thought this came out amazingly well. And once we have that distributed nice and evenly, we will go ahead and scatter over the grated cheese of our choice. Although I am really hoping you scatter over the cheese of my choice, which would be a nice cheddar, But anyway, dealer's choice, and use whatever you want, as long as you grate it yourself. Okay, this is non-negotiable. And then once we've cheesed the surface, we will press that down lightly with the tip of a spatula or spoon before we move on to the last step, the tater totting. Oh yeah, we're going to tot the entire surface. And I guess you don't have to apply these in perfectly neat rows, but I think I speak for most of us when I tell you, it is going to bother us if you don't. So what I like to do is do one perfect column like this, and then go across making one perfect row. And once your first column and row are done, the rest of the top is easy to fill in. And if everything goes according to plan, you should end up with a perfectly uniform design. And if you use a pan exactly this size, which fit 9 tots length and 9 tots width, you will need exactly 81 tots. So you're going to have to buy a 2-pound bag, since a 1-pound bag won't get you enough. So what I'm trying to say is you're going to have some leftover tots, which, speaking of columns, definitely goes in the good problem column. And that's it. After the tater totting, we can, if we want, do one optional step by scattering over a little more grated cheese, which I always do, because I think it just makes it look nicer. But anyway, suit yourself. Although a little tip, if you're going to do it, make sure your cheese is cold. Okay, I shredded this earlier and then left it out. And if you do that, it's going to stick to your fingers and be hard to scatter and spread evenly. So if you do that ahead, you'll want to keep it cold. And that's it. Once the cheese has been applied, this is ready to pop into the center of a 450-degree oven for about 30 to 35 minutes, or until it looks like this. Oh yeah, now that is a beautiful hot dish. In fact, that is so gorgeous, we don't even have to garnish the top. Although having said that, I couldn't help but shake over a little more cayenne, for really no good reason. And that's it. What we're calling turkey tater tot hot dish was ready to enjoy. So I went ahead and spooned some up into a bowl. And as you can see, I went for a 3-tot by 3-tot size portion, which, if my math's correct, is a 9-tot portion. And then because I have them growing right outside my window, I went ahead and added some fresh chive. Plus, in Minnesota, that actually counts as a side of vegetables. And then I grabbed a spoon and dug in. And that, my friends, is everything I want in a comforting casserole and more. All right, we have that beautifully meaty, super savory turkey base, which is just not a perfect pairing with the tater tots flavor-wise, but the contrast between that saucy, meaty mixture underneath and those crisp, cheesy tots on top just makes this absolutely irresistible. And while this kind of thing is almost always done with ground beef, I really do love the combination of that mushroom and turkey, since we end up with something almost identical in flavor. Plus, not to mention, probably better nutritionally. But anyway, whether you do this with ground beef, or another kind of ground meat, or use turkey like we did here, this is classic American comfort food at its finest, which is why I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.